This is Jeff Young, the CIO in residence for the Confer Group. Today, I want to introduce to you Greg Woodard. He's the principal at Solve100, and he's here to talk to you today about the Gartner Magic Quadrant and the top players in that quadrant, including Power BI, Qlik, and Tableau. We will be discussing that and taking your questions as we move forward with this. Thanks again for joining us, and Greg, it's all yours.
We do everything from visualization reporting, we do data warehousing, we do data governance, augmented intelligence, and machine learning, on and on. So kind of everything you can imagine. But today, we wanted to talk about the Magic Quadrant. So when you think about the Magic Quadrant, I don't know if you've seen the Gartner reviews before, but that Magic Quadrant is the upper right. And there's two axes. Ability to execute is the vertical one, and completeness of vision is the horizontal. And for the last number of years, Microsoft, Tableau, and Qlik have been in the Magic Quadrant. ThoughtSpot made a brief visit, I think last year or the year before. But one of the things that we've learned about is as Gartner is reviewing and what makes a leader, what makes a challenger, those four different areas that they kind of bracket people into. One of the key statements they came about was that the platforms are no longer differentiated by their data visualization. It's more, that has become very, standard, commoditized, and that right now it's more about all the other augmented analytics capabilities that they're offering through their platform. So we'll kind of dig into that here in a little bit. So when you talk about the ability to execute, this is what their criteria is. So obviously they're rating the product or service. They're looking at the overall viability, which factors in both who owns the company, their financial status, their existing and prospective customers. So it's a little bit, there's some specific number based, but there's a lot of opinion based in this as well. Then you have the sales execution pricing, marketing response, market responsiveness, and the record. Their marketing execution, which is not really rated or weighted, but it's in there and it does factor some of their decisions. Customer experience and operations. So that's kind of the ability to execute. For the completeness of vision, it's their strategy, their market understanding, their strategy, their sales strategy, and their product and offering strategies are the highest, combined with innovation. So companies that are sitting with a product that's been good, but they're not innovating it, would obviously probably fall out of that Magic Quadrant. So this is kind of the factors that go into this. And a lot of it is very nuanced. So I think that you all might know that some of the Gartner reviews are impacted by, the cost to get on the Gartner review is a barrier to entry for many companies. So when they're looking at this Magic Quadrant and they're really digging into the functional areas of a product as one of those points that they're evaluating, these are the key areas that they're looking at. The security, the manageability. I won't read the whole list to you, but these are the key ones, and they're not in any particular order. So number one isn't the number one issue, it's just the area evaluated. So I'd say what I'm learning a lot is number 7, when they talk about augmented intelligence, those automated insights is a key thing they're looking at. As well as number 9, data storytelling, 11, natural language generation, and natural language query number 10. Those are all big points that they look at. Any questions before I keep going?
Hi, this is Brian White at Red Gold. I noticed Infor on there. Do you know if that is considered Burst bought Infor? So do you think, is it the Burst product that they would be evaluating?
I believe Burst is part of it. I do believe they made some other acquisitions as well that are in the Infor product. What I've seen is, Burst, we were a partner years ago with Burst. When Infor bought them, they became more of a vertical integration partner of into the other Infor products. I don't see them in many situations when someone's doing analytics on a non-other Infor product these days, unless it was there before that.
Okay. Then I'm assuming IBM listed on here would be equal Cognos.
I believe so.
Okay.
Let's jump in and look at just kind of a number of top items that are on the list here and compare Power BI, Qlik, and Tableau. And then we'll kind of dig in a little deeper on some of these. So one of the things that's kind of table stakes these days is in-memory analytics. So both Power BI and Qlik offer that. Tableau has it. It's marked yellow because their hyper product is a little bit newer, isn't quite as efficient, and so rating it in our mind just a little bit lower than the other two. When we look at has an ETL engine, the idea of the ability to bring data into the product natively, Power BI has Power Query and data flows, which are part of it. Power Query is what you do in all your desktop building of Power BI. And Qlik has that same ability. That's been a major advantage of Qlik over the years, was its ability to do all the ETL natively without having to have a data warehouse. So, and then Tableau recently came out with Tableau Prep. It's an add-on that you can get with Tableau. It's probably version, I think it's been out 2 years now. It's kind of a response to, historically, you had to use other data prep tools with Tableau. For example, Alteryx is something many people who are Tableau users combine to create. It used to historically do the ETL work, and Tableau was the front end, unless you already had a data warehouse or something that Tableau connected to. Natural language, they all do it. Power BI leverages Cortana and just text search boxes. Qlik leverages Insight Advisor, and it will support mainly just text searching, unless your device you're on supports, like Cortana, some sort of taking voice and converting it to text. Tableau has an offering. It's in the Einstein product line that existed before Salesforce acquired Tableau, but it's also in its infancy. So as you look down the list here, predictive integration, they all do it. So there's not a lot of differentiation there. On the Tableau side, Einstein Discovery is something that is an add-on to Tableau, but it's not part of the base product. Whereas with Microsoft, they also, the Azure Machine Learning is an add-on. You can do R integration. Qlik has R. So with server-side extensions, you can do R and Python integration. But there's also, they just acquired a company called Big Squid, which is an auto ML player, which will be competition more on the line of Azure ML, because they'll be integrated into your data models and be rolled into the SaaS offering probably in 2022. Feel free to interrupt me at any time if you have questions. We're going a little deep right away, and we'll kind of come back a little bit higher level and kind of go through some other stuff on future slides. The web development environment, Power BI and Tableau are mainly desktop based. Power BI, you can do limited web capabilities. Tableau is, they're building out their web capabilities, but mostly the way to do development right now in both those platforms with full capability is through the desktop edition. Qlik has a desktop edition, but in fact, it's really just a web front end, even in the desktop. So everything with Qlik is web-based. So it helps if you have a very blended developer environment between Mac and PC, since it's just a web interface. I believe the other two will get there. That is the plan, that everybody will have a full capable web development environment in the near future. Custom APIs. It's a Power BI as a robust API, not fully integrated, not every feature. Qlik has native API, so that any users everything in Qlik is done through the API. Qlik uses it itself, so fully capable. Tableau is retrofitting APIs. It's something they didn't have for a number of years, but they're implementing it for certain use cases. Paginated reporting. When we get into the licensing discussion, this will be interesting to kind of talk further about. Power BI has paginated reporting, which is a premium feature. Qlik has end printing, which is a premium feature. And Tableau really doesn't have a native paginated reporting feature. It's more about sending dashboards as a PDF, which both Qlik and Power BI can also do that. All of them, from a multi-cloud on-prem SaaS perspective, have SaaS offerings. The only one that does not have a fully featured on-prem edition is Microsoft Power BI. They do have an on-prem version. It is a premium edition, and it's not as fully featured as their SaaS environment. Otherwise, both Qlik and Tableau can be run on-prem or in a private cloud and have SaaS offerings. The big differentiator is their mobile experience. They all have mobile apps, but both Power BI and Tableau do device-specific layouts, while Qlik is more of a responsive design approach where it scales your application to fit the screen size automatically. They all do subscriptions to dashboard visualizations and alerting, so there's really not much of a difference there. A main differentiator, if you have SQL Server Analysis Services or Azure Analysis Services, Power BI and Tableau can connect directly, while Qlik is an import-only option. So I threw a lot at you on the first screen there. I'm going to delve into a few more of the differences and similarities as we go through here. Any questions? When you think of the history of these products, I didn't put a slide in here about this, but Qlik has been around since the early 90s. Tableau came out in the early 2000s, and Power BI came out in around 2015, maybe 2014. So they have different ages and different maturity levels. So I would say that Power BI was a direct response to Tableau and has the most similarities. Those two platforms have the most similarities on how they go to market, how you use a desktop environment, and how you build out dashboards. Qlik, being the oldest, came out with a product called QlikView in, I think, 93. Their latest product and what their SaaS environment grew out of was called Qlik Sense. And that came out probably about 2014 as well. And that is their response to Tableau. So it's much more Tableau-like, more graphically appealing, and completely web-based. I think one of the biggest differences I see between the products when it comes down to self-service and how users will use the product. So they all can create wonderful visualizations. If it was visualizations that are the most important thing and the capabilities of the visualization, I really would need to give the nod to Tableau on the quality of the visualizations. They have the most robust, flexible, and the most powerful options to do different things. But if you look at it more from a self-service perspective, then my answer will change. Although when you give people the ability to build in Power BI and Qlik and Tableau, they're all going to be starting from the same data source in your organization. So depending on what their skill sets are, what they know about building visualizations, what tools they've used in the past, that would definitely impact your decision as to which of these tools is best for you. From my perspective, the use case kind of helps determine which is the best. If you're looking to provide users the ability to developers to build dashboards and publish them, and then users are going to use those dashboards but not really want to make changes to them, or do data discovery, but just use what's presented to them, more of a static pane of glass, then that levels the playing field between the three products. If instead you want to give users the ability to say, here is a dashboard, and I want to be able to allow them to build their own visualizations, build their own sheets, I think there's a big difference between the three products. So for example, for Power BI, you publish you build them in a desktop edition, and you publish them out to the Power BI service. You can also give them all the dashboards, and they can run it in Power BI desktop. That's completely free. In that scenario, you lose all governance and ability to kind of control who sees what. If you do publish to the Power BI service with Power BI, then you can give people access to the workspace where you publish those dashboards, and they can use them. You can also give people the ability to make changes to those dashboards once they're published. And some of those changes can be done just through the web interface. Some they'd need to download and do it in Power BI desktop. But when you do that, people, when they make the changes, those changes are visible to everyone. You can't just say they can have the power to create new sheets but not change these sheets. So the changes they make impact what everybody sees. So lots of times in organizations, what we see is people making a copy of the dashboard and then making changes and having their own version. So then you start to get this proliferation of copies of the same dashboard, and all the while it's providing good self-service, but it can get hard to manage over time, and you get this proliferation of reports. Similar happens on the Tableau side. So you can give people the ability to change the dashboards. Those changes are visible to everybody if they make those changes. And again, instead of, they call their dashboards workbooks, Power BI calls them reports. But you get that proliferation of workbooks. And if you're going with the viewer license of Tableau, they can't make any changes. So in that regard, they're a viewer only. They have very limited rights just to use and filter data. Qlik took a little bit of a different tact on this. So users can be given either one, there's a couple different license type. One is called an analyzer, which is much like the viewer of Tableau. So those types of users wouldn't be able to make changes to dashboards. But if you're a professional user and have been given the rights to, users are given the ability to create their own sheets and publish any sheet they create out to others in an area called community. So as a developer, I could take an app and maybe I build out an app, a dashboard application with 20 different sheets that's published out, and then I give rights to people to see that application. And depending on who they are, unless I've filtered rights, they can see all 20 sheets. They could then say, I want to change sheet number 2. Well, they can't change it. They can make a copy of it, which would move it into their My Sheet area. They could make their changes, then they could publish it into an area called community. So those original 20 sheets stay the way they were intended by the developer, but from a self-service perspective, people make copies of them or create completely new sheets, and then you have this user community of sheets that are being built by your users. Now, they can't change the underlying data model unless they're a full developer and you give them that right, but they can use all the data available in the app to build out their own visualizations. So that's the main difference I see between Qlik and Power BI and Tableau, is Qlik has that community ability and people to create My Sheets without having to make a copy of the application. Does that make sense? Any questions? From another perspective, self-service, Excel integration, I would say the most integrated would be Microsoft. They have the ability to take your data model that's in Power BI and analyze it in Excel. So it becomes your pivot table data source for any pivot tables you want to create in Excel, which is very powerful. So now you have a web-based data model usable in Excel to do analysis in Excel with. Both Qlik and Tableau have the export to Excel option and third-party extensions. For example, Tableau has a third-party extension that will go through and export all sorts of data from your Tableau into Excel while maintaining some formatting. Qlik has an add-on called Analytics Gate, which basically offers the same option as Analyze in Excel with Power BI and some paginated reporting features. So I think it depends on what your use case is and how important Excel integration is. They can all use Excel as a data source as well. I also touched on visualizations earlier. I think, as Gartner said, they're not a key differentiator anymore, but I would say that Tableau is probably the best. Power BI has second most options, and Qlik probably has the third, although I don't see that there's a huge difference in numbers, just a few different capabilities, and usually in specific use cases where a user wants a very specific type of chart, where one tool might do a better job than the other. But for all your base ones, pie charts, bar charts, scatter charts, all the normal ones that are available in all of them. It just becomes those extra ones that are very infrequently used that might be a little bit different between the platforms. Any questions? All right. I'll keep going then. Feel free to interrupt. In terms of architecture, I think these are important to know the differences of. From a data modeling perspective, I'll start with Qlik. It is mostly an import in-memory tool. So the benefit of Qlik is that you import data into it, you build your data model inside of Qlik, and it uses its associative data model to provide that information out to your user base. Its key capabilities there are around how Qlik surfaces that data for the users. So if you were to say, well, I just want to connect Qlik to a SAS model or a different kind of OLAP model, Qlik is not the great tool for that. It can import data from SQL Server Analysis Services or other ones, or from the data sources it provides those, but it's more of an import in-memory tool, and that's where it really succeeds. Power BI and Tableau offer a few different options. They have the same import capability, but Power BI offers a direct query or a direct connect to a SAS cube. Tableau also offers live connections and live connections off to OLAP/cube data, whether it's SAS or potentially others. From a data prep, they all have connectors to just about every platform you can imagine, whether it's web-based, relational database, APIs, flat files. The Microsoft ecosystem, I think very quickly, Power BI will have issues with importing data because it has a data limit. Each workspace can have up to 10 gigabyte in data, and no dashboard can have more than 1 gigabyte of data in it. So it tends to get a little limiting there unless you opt for the premium version of Power BI. But with the native connectors, with Power Query, you can get a lot of data and do your ETL work. You can extract it, you can transform it, and load it into Power BI. You can also use, through their web product, data flows. You can leverage Azure Data Factory, which also can run SSIS packages, or you can just connect into an on-premise data source through their enterprise data gateways. So Power BI's approach is more of a query-based approach. I'm going to talk about that a little more in a future slide, comparing associative to query-based. Tableau is very similar. They have lots of connectors. Up until recently, all prep needed to be done in a third party or outside of Tableau, but a couple of years ago, they released Tableau Prep. And I would say that depending on your data architecture in your company, live connections or importing is a big decision. I think you'll find performance in the front end of a dashboard much better if you can import the data, and all three of them support importing. If you have to connect to a SaaS or OLAP environment, then Power BI and Tableau will be better. But if the only reason you have that OLAP environment is to support Power BI and Tableau, looking at Qlik might be an option, because then maybe you wouldn't need that other platform. So it all depends on your skill sets within your organization. If you have a ton of skills around people knowing how to do SaaS and build out those kinds of connections, maybe they know DAX language really well, Power BI might be your better choice. If you have Essbase or even SaaS, Tableau might be a good one if you want a live connection as well. So it just depends on how you want to approach it. It adds a lot of different technology stacks to your company, and it really comes down to what your use case is. Any questions? All right, I'm going to try to speed up a little bit. I want to get through this so we can have a conversation. A couple other things. Security, from a perspective of, they all have multiple ways to do security. They call their organization categories a little bit different. Workspaces for Power BI, streams and spaces for Qlik, sites and categories for Tableau. They all provide row-level security. It's called something else in Qlik, section access, but it's the same thing. And they all support some form of single sign-on. So you can see the ones there. I would say that if you're with Power BI, you're kind of limited to Office 365 or Azure AD. With Tableau, you can do Active Directory or any OIDC compliant SSO solution. For Qlik, it depends on if you're on-prem or SaaS. On-prem, they do SAML, Active Directory, JOT, or any SSO that can support ticketing. On the SaaS environments, any OIDC compliant or JOT kind of approach. Additional features, we've talked a little bit about this. They all have some form of way to get data out of them into other tools. Power BI has paginated reporting, ability to send spreadsheets as a PDF or as a PowerPoint. Qlik has something called end printing, which does paginated reporting off of using Qlik as a data source. They'll have a new enterprise reporting feature in the cloud later this quarter. And they can also export sheets and what they call stories, which are kind of like PowerPoint, to PDF or to PowerPoint. And then Tableau has Tableau CRM, which used to be known as Einstein. It doesn't integrate directly to Tableau. It's more of an offering that's separate. And then in addition to that, they have the ability to export their workbooks to PDF. So we had talked about they all kind of have a form of natural language. A big differentiator would be orchestration or automation. If you're looking to do stuff with your analytics platform where you can control it through workflow, Microsoft can leverage the Power Automate, and they have the flow and all those capabilities to do things and control aspects of Power BI. Qlik purchased Blender.io, which just was released as Qlik Application Automation. Allows you, kind of like Zapier or if this then that, to control both Qlik and external programs like Salesforce or any REST API or email or Teams or Slack, much like Power Automate can do. And then a few years ago, Salesforce also bought MuleSoft, which has integrations into Tableau through the API, but its capabilities are only limited by the Tableau API. I talked about the API already. I think that Qlik has the most native one, Power BI is the second best, and Tableau is probably third. So it really comes down to your use case there. All right, let's talk about licensing, unless someone has any questions. From a licensing standpoint, at first blush, Power BI is the cheapest option out there if you look at only licensing. It comes out at $10 per user per month for a Pro edition. If you have Microsoft Office 365 E5, it's free. It's included. I guess it's not free. And if you consumer license and developer license are the same price. Qlik has two different users, professional and analyzer, and Tableau has creator and explorer and viewer. So depending on the feature set you need, sometimes your price per user could be lower with Tableau, although you need to add in some other costs as well that I'll cover on the next page. Qlik has one other kind of license called analyzer capacity, which is time-based. Unlike all the other licensing I've talked about here, this is not named based. This is time based. So you could have 1,000 people sharing these minutes, or 2,000. It's just all, each person consumes 6 minutes of the 1,000 minutes every time they log in. So I think the unknown thing, and if you only compare the licensing, Power BI is obviously a lot cheaper. What isn't completely obvious is the premium features of Power BI. So all these products offer a level of integration at a base price, and then if they have SaaS platforms, price does go up from a base, and then they do have to apply limits. Otherwise, I think it would get a little crazy for them. For Power BI, they have what's called premium licensing. The initial thing they came out with is premium capacity. It's $5,000 a month for the first few virtual CPUs, and then goes up from there as you add memory or virtual CPU capacity needs. What that does is when you publish applications out to a workspace, you can back that workspace with premium capacity, which allows your apps to be bigger, to do more frequent reloads, and to allow an unlimited number of users to use those dashboards. It's no longer name-based, it's capacity-based. So as long as the number of virtual CPUs and memory in the level you buy will support the number of users, you can have as many users as you want. If you get poor performance and you have to up your capacity, you might go from 5,000 to 10,000, to double your CPUs and memory. So it just depends on your use case. They then came out with something called premium per user. So you could take one user and increase their capabilities and give them additional features. And it basically incremented the cost of the user license and went up $10 per month. So that only allows that one user to use premium features. It doesn't allow unlimited users to use their dashboards. Qlik doesn't have a premium user account. They do limit their capacity in their SaaS product only, so that if you do have apps greater than 5 GB each or 10 GB, you either have to go to extended or dedicated capacity, and that's provided. Cost is then more of a negotiation with Qlik. And lastly, Qlik has Qlik Forts, which allows you to bring a private cloud and integrate it to SaaS. No cost from Qlik. You just have to bear the cost of Qlik Forts, of the environment to run Qlik Forts in. And that's kind of a scaled down, basically SaaS version running in a private cloud. Otherwise, things to think about. There's lots of add-ons. On Tableau side, you might have a data management add-on, a server management add-on for high availability. That Einstein Discovery, which is kind of their ML approach, comes at $25 a user. Tableau Prep costs money. From paginated reporting, end printing is obviously additional cost on the Qlik side. Paginated reporting comes with premium licensing with Microsoft. And Tableau CRM on the Tableau side would come at additional cost as well. Any questions on licensing? This is probably the easiest one for us to price is probably Qlik it's pretty straightforward. I'd say Tableau is probably second. When you get to Power BI, depending on how much of the Azure services you use, like if you look at the recommended approach that Microsoft pushes for Power BI, it's not Power BI only. They're starting to recommend a combination of Power BI and Azure Synapse. So, and if you leverage Azure Analysis Services or Azure SQL, or you need to pull on-prem data, you need a SQL Server running an enterprise data gateway. It's harder to estimate the cost of Microsoft because a lot of their products, some are fixed, some are usage-based. So it really becomes down to more of a question of the use case, how you're going to implement everything, where your data is, are there going to be moving between regions, all sorts of that kind of questions. Qlik and Tableau, I think, are a little more straightforward in that regard, but there probably are things to consider on those sides as well as to where is your data sitting, how are you pulling the data in, are there going to be any data charges moving your data around, that kind of thing. Questions, comments? All right, really quickly, I'm going to move through this. Microsoft owns Power BI. Qlik is owned by a private equity, Thoma Bravo. They've been buying a lot of different things over the years. Tableau is owned by Salesforce, who also bought MuleSoft and Slack recently. So the last thing I kind of want to cover would be explaining the difference between query-based and associative data engines. I think they're a big difference between how the three platforms work. From a Power BI and Tableau, which are more query-based, they tend to limit, the way to build efficient dashboards is to limit the data you're pulling in to make them highly responsive, keeping the number of columns, rows, aggregating wherever possible. Those same kinds of tools apply on the Qlik side, but the way Qlik works memory-wise allows you to bring in a lot more data and a lot more data models. So historically, with the query approach, you're writing a query that joins tables, signified by the orange on the screen. And you might create a report based on a query or a view. You then visualize it and make it available to your users. Maybe you want to do another report. You might then build out another query. So on the right here at the top is Tableau, where you might bring in limited amounts of data. Down here is a picture from Power BI of how you might bring that data together and establish your one-to-many relationships and that kind of stuff. On the left is the Qlik approach. So that blue box kind of signifies the data that Tableau and Power BI are using. And then, here's my sales, here's might be my sales rep, here's my products. But then I'm also pulling in all sorts of other data here. So this is all possible in Power BI as well. Just the size and data limits sometimes impede that. Tableau can do this as well. I think Qlik does it better in some cases. But again, I think they all can get the job done. So the idea of associative...
Greg?
Yeah.
Greg, I'd like to add a little point to this concept that you just talked about here, the associative approach. We're using Qlik actively at Nielsen Massey, and this different associative approach has helped me accomplish a lot more goals in meeting the needs of the business much more quickly as they pivot and change their mind on what direction they want to go and how they change what their requirements are quite frequently. This associative approach has allowed us to be much more responsive to them. It's just a different way to kind of think of it. And I just kind of wanted to throw it out there for you guys so you might help with the understanding the differences.
No, thank you, Heather. I think it's hard to wrap your brain around associative if you haven't looked at it before. I'm going to attempt it with this visualization I'm about to show. But the idea here is I'm bringing in all those different data points, dimension tables, fact tables, and using them. And then what I'm going to do is I have all these different queries that now are part of this overall data model. And then as you use it, all those queries that I was running to do reports in Power BI or Tableau are part of this one data model, so I could create that analysis within Qlik without having to go do a round trip and do a new query. And so those different queries are all part of that data model. I don't know. I'd like the visualization. Love your feedback later if it made sense. So I'm going to go through a couple things on Power BI architecture, strengths and weaknesses. One, Power BI, and I will send out these slides afterwards, so you don't have to read them all right now. But I think what I'm trying to cover here is a lot of different strengths and weaknesses. I think it's easy to get started. I think it's widely recognized on the short list for many people. I think it has access to the entire Microsoft ecosystem, which is good. I think the weaknesses are there's a lot of hidden costs to a full enterprise solution. There's a lot of potential for application bloat, that idea of having to copy and change things all the time. And it only runs in Azure. So some people who are more AWS people won't like that as much. And there's just some limited on-premise functionality if you have a lot of security concerns. So there's some other points in here. I'm going to show another slide just because I thought it was funny, but this is a slide that if you think about Microsoft, they have a ton of offerings out here. So this is not a slam on Microsoft. There's a lot out there that Microsoft can do, but think of Power BI as your entree into this ecosystem, and be cautious about what parts of this ecosystem you're going to need over time, because there's a lot here, and Power BI is a great tool, but I think as things move forward, to really match it against Tableau and Qlik, you're going to have to consume other parts of the Azure environment. The Qlik architecture, and I shaded that one maroon box because that's pretty much what the Gartner Quadrant was evaluating. But Qlik also has data integration, catalog, etc. Strengths and weaknesses, I've covered a lot of these already. So in the interest of time, I'll let you look at this later as part of the slide deck. Tableau has their server product that you can run on-prem or in the cloud, the private cloud. And they also have their Tableau Online. And then strengths and weaknesses, we've covered a lot of this already as well, but I'll leave that in here. At the end of the day, the factors that impact your decision should really come down to what technology stack you're using at your organization, what the skills of your technologists and business users are, and your use cases. And things that might impact your decision are, do you already have a SaaS, tabular, or multidimensional model existing? Are you more of a Google shop versus Microsoft, or are you more of an AWS than Azure? You don't want to run SQL Server. It's a requirement to access on-premise data with Power BI. Do you need governed self-service? Do you support a lot of Mac users or developers? Do you want it on-premise or only in the cloud? And do you ever want to embed this into other platforms? So with that, open it to conversation. I know I used up a lot of the time, but just wanted to get your opinions, what you guys are using, any questions you have. Happy to have follow-on discussions as well, and you can weigh in on anything.
Hey, this is Brian Tullis at Albany. So I think I'm starting to get the associative model approach with Qlik, and I think it's one of the reasons some of our end users say they get more out of Qlik for certain use cases than they do out of our Power BI stack, because we have both. I think it's just something I want us to understand more. And so Alan, who's on the call, we have a challenge to kind of dig into this a little bit more, to understand a little bit what these fundamental differences are and how they're applying to the use cases our users have. And I mean, one of the questions I have as a CIO is, well, do I really need both of these tools? And I don't want to take tools out of anybody's hands, but at the end of the day, if there are some things that Qlik will just always do better than Power BI, sometimes it's just easier to run in the direction of the crowd rather than trying to stand in front of them. So I'm just interested to learn more. I'm not sure I'm going to learn more in the next 5 minutes, but I think this is a nice takeaway for me. So I appreciate that.
And I'd be happy to have further discussion. And I've developed in both Power BI and Qlik and Tableau extensively. So I'd be happy to kind of share my vision on the differences. And when we go live with customers, our job doesn't end when we publish the dashboard. And I'm sure you do this as well. It's mentoring and, lunches or feedback loops so that as they review the dashboards, we iterate them to make them useful. Because 9 times out of 10, if you launch something and it's not adopted, people just fall back to how they've always done it, like Excel. Make sure I have that export to Excel button. I hear a lot. So I'm always trying to help understand what the users are trying to do to figure out how to make either tool better for them.
Yeah. It sounds like too with Microsoft, and maybe you guys are all experiencing this too, but when you look at a modern version of a 365 Excel client, I mean, I know Alan and other Brian who are on the call from my company will tell me it's not exactly the same. But if you're going to use Power Query in Excel, it's an awful lot like what you're using in the Power BI client. And so it seems like they're just trying to embrace that and say, you know what, we're just gonna merge this together and make it less of a, you're still going to interact with, at least you're going to interact with online data, and you're not going to dump it to Excel where it becomes disconnected from, whatever source of truth that you think you have. So I think that's an angle and a strength of Microsoft maybe that lends some weight to the Microsoft approach to things. But
yeah, and I think that there's a couple different ways to do that. On the Microsoft side, when you build a Power BI data model, you're building an SSAS cube, whether you know it or not. It's just a smaller engine. So it's the same kind of technology that's why you can connect a Power BI dashboard to SAS, or when you import it, it's basically creating SAS in and of itself. So the idea of being able to define measures and dimensions gives users that ability to do some self-service and create visualizations. I just think where Power BI breaks down is it's hard for people to write DAX. It's a heavy lift for a lot of people, and that idea that how do they change what's there becomes kind of a security and governance question, and how do you manage all the workspaces and dashboards, et cetera. On the Qlik side, you have what's called master items, dimensions and measures that users can create visualizations from. So it works much the same way. And Tableau has similar things as well. So it's a lot to think about what the right approach for enabling self-service. I feel like Power BI named their dashboards reports, kind of with that historical approach of it's a query-based, I'm running this and doing some analysis, which is kind of certain data, a limited data set. Where I think Tableau comes at it from that approach as well. The early days were on top of Excel files and they added databases, but it's much more limited data set, great visualizations. I think Qlik went at it from, we want to pull everything in and do data discovery. So the idea that you can basically keyword search your entire data model is cool. And I'm happy to dig into this in a separate session with you or anybody who wants to join and talk about associative and some of the pros and cons of each at a deeper level.
Yep, appreciate that. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Jeff, I think you're muted if you're talking to us.
You're right. I was trying to stay clear of getting any noise in there. Anyway, I want to thank you, Greg, for doing this today. I think the presentation has been excellent. I think everybody was well engaged. I wanted to point out we will send this deck and the recording to all of you if that would be of use to you in any way. So I know some of the slides had a lot of information on them. Also, all of you that are signed up here today are signed up for November 4th, where Greg will be talking about data literacy and how your company benefits. I mean, we all know that, you know, whatever tool you use, if your users don't understand the data in front of them or the data available, the tools break down. So I think this next session with Solve will also be very helpful to everyone. And I appreciate everybody taking the time today to be with us. Greg, again, thank you. Solve, thank you. All the executives on the call appreciate your time. So everybody have a great day, and we look forward to your continued support of the Confer Group. Thank you. Take care.